Hi, thanks for joining us for today's video. Please keep watching to see a clip from the latest video from our new channel, Paranormally Listed. It's about 3 haunted houses that were made famous by horror movies. Before we get into today's video, we just want to take a few moments to talk about our wonderful sponsor, Magellan TV. In a lot of ways, autumn is beautiful. But when it gets cold and wet, I really don't want to leave the house. On days like that, I love curling up on the couch and watching some great documentaries, and there's no better place to find documentaries than Magellan TV. I love checking out their new releases section because 15 to 20 hours of new material is added every week. I was really excited when I logged on the other day and I saw that they had a new documentary about Jack the Ripper called Jack the Ripper, the German Suspect. As the title suggests, the documentary proposes a suspect in one of the greatest serial killer mysteries of all time. They proposed it was a German sailor and convicted murderer, Karl Feigenbaum. I've read a lot about Jack the Ripper, and I've seen dozens of documentaries, but I've never heard this theory. It's a fascinating documentary, and I think you'll really like it. Jack the Ripper, the German Suspect, is just one of over 3,000 documentaries that are available on Magellan TV. They have a bunch of really good true crime documentaries, but they also have great documentaries in many other topics. Right now, Magellan TV has an amazing offer that'll make for a great gift for those people who are hard to buy for. From now until December 31st, when you buy one annual membership, you'll get another one for free. So you can buy someone an annual membership to the best documentary streaming service on the planet, and you'll get an annual membership for yourself. It's too bad more gift shopping didn't reward you that way. To get this amazing offer, just go to try.magellantv.com/criminallylisted. So check out this limited time deal because it's a great gift and you'll get a membership for yourself. Number 3. Jesse Aylward. In early 1984, 59-year-old Virginia Hannon lived in the small town of Pembroke, Massachusetts. She had been a widow since 1971 when her husband, Joseph, died. They had no children. But Virginia, who went by Ginny, would bake treats for children in the neighborhood. She would also feed stray dogs and cats. She had worked as a cook in the cafeteria at the local school. Then, sometime in the early 1980s, her aunt died and left her $380,000. After getting the inheritance, she retired. Despite her newfound wealth, she continued to live modestly. She lived in the same house and drove her old beat-up car. Ginny liked to play bingo and loved family cookouts. One problem that Ginny had was that she was too open. She would often tell people personal information after only knowing them for a short while. So many people knew that she had gotten the inheritance. On Saturday, February 11th, 1984, Ginny and her friend went to a 5 o'clock church service. Afterward, they went out for dinner. Then, around 7:30 p.m., Ginny's friend dropped her off at home. Going to church and a restaurant for dinner with her friend was a typical Saturday for Ginny. 2 days later, the dead body of 59-year-old Ginny Hannon was found in her bed. Her death had been brutal. It appeared that she had been kicked in the stomach hard enough to leave a bruise. She had been stabbed 6 times in the abdomen and once in the left eye. The cause of death was strangulation with a pair of nylon stockings. There were no signs of sexual assault. It's believed that the motive was robbery. There were rumors around the neighborhood that Ginny kept the money from her inheritance hidden in her house. The killer may have tortured her to get her to reveal the location of her money. The police interviewed over 100 people, but they didn't make any arrests. It wasn't long before the case went cold. In 2019, the evidence from the crime scene was examined for DNA. Blood had been found on some broken glass, some paper towels, and on the nylon stockings used to strangle Ginny. The blood belonged to the same man, but no match to the DNA was found. The police tried to find the killer through genetic genealogy, but they were not successful. Then on February 4th, 2020, 36 years after the murder, the police received a phone call. The caller said that their friend, 58-year-old Jesse Aylward, had been dying in the hospital. He confessed to killing Ginny Hannon. Aylward was 22 years old at the time of the murder. He grew up in Pembroke and he didn't live far from Ginny. However, it's not known if they knew each other. Aylward did have a criminal record which included convictions for assault. According to his obituary, he owned a paving and seal coating business. He was also a skilled handyman. He never had children of his own. Aylward died on February 3, 2020, and his friend reported his deathbed confession the next day. So the police were able to go to the hospital and get a sample of Aylward's DNA. They compared it to the killer's DNA, and it was a match. In March 2021, the police announced that the murder of Ginny Hannon was officially closed after 37 years. Number 2. Norman Raisbeck. In 1969, Anne Zappelli lived in the small town of Moruwa in Western Australia. After high school, Zappelli got a job as a telephone operator. When she was 20, she entered the Miss Australia Quest, which is a beauty pageant. In the lead up to the pageant, she raised $1,500 for charity. On September 27, 1969, she was supposed to go in front of the judging panel. But 10 days before that, she traveled to Geraldton, which is on the coast of Western Australia. She had to write an exam to advance her career. On September 22, 1969, Zappelli and several friends went to a drive-in movie theater just outside of Geraldton. But they arrived late and the movie had already started. Zappelli decided she wanted to leave and started walking back to Geraldton, which was about 2 miles away. A motorist saw a car with 2 men pull up behind her. Another driver saw the 2 men walking behind her. Their car was parked close by. One man was tall and he walked with a limp, and the other man was short. This was the last time 20-year-old Anne Zappelli was seen alive. 2 days later, her body was found in some bushland not far from where she was last seen. She had been raped, beaten, and strangled to death. Unfortunately, the police botched the investigation. Imprints of tire and shoe prints were not taken. They did collect her clothes, fingernail scrapings, and swabs from her body, but they were later lost. Also, Zappelli's fingerprints were not taken. This could have been important because she might have left her fingerprints behind if she was placed in a car or touched something of the killers. The police had 2 suspects, Thomas Craig and Norman Raisbeck. They were known to the police because they had assaulted other women. In 1967, Craig served about 9 months in jail for attacking a woman with a hammer. They also matched the description of the men seen following Zappelli. Craig was a short man, and Raisbeck was tall and he walked with a limp. Also, their car matched the description of the car that witnesses saw following Zappelli. On the night of Zappelli's murder, they left town. 4 days later, they turned up 1,800 miles away in Adelaide, South Australia. 13 days after the murder, the lead detective flew to Adelaide to interview the 2 men. Raisbeck told him that they had left town before the murder. Without looking into it, the detective believed them and decided to eliminate them as suspects. So their car was not examined for forensic evidence. It was later determined that their alibi was false. Unfortunately, Thomas Craig continued to attack women. 18 months after Anne Zappelli was murdered, Craig was visiting his friend, Kate Preedy, and her husband. An 18-year-old woman was also visiting. Craig started strangling the 18-year-old woman and he screamed, "I'll do to you what I did to Anne Zappelli." Preedy's husband chased Craig out of the house. They did not report the incident to the police. 4 years later, a 16-year-old girl was hitchhiking near Margaret River, Western Australia. She accepted a ride from Craig, who she knew from around town. After driving a short distance, he pulled over and got a piece of firewood from the bed of his truck. He opened the passenger door and struck the young woman several times in the head with a piece of firewood. The young woman begged him to stop, and she promised she wouldn't tell anyone. She also promised to be his friend. Craig stopped attacking her, and then he dropped her off at home. She immediately called the police. But Craig wasn't convicted of the assault because the police report didn't contain enough information. The court also wasn't allowed to hear about Craig's other convictions. In 1980, a man who wanted to stay anonymous called a radio station in Perth. The caller admitted to being involved in a murder in Geraldton. The investigators believed that the caller was Norman Raisbeck. The investigators decided to track him down and offer him a deal. If he would testify against Craig, they would give him immunity. But then, something odd happened. The lead detective on the initial investigation had the search for Raisbeck shut down. At the time, he was deputy commissioner and he was about to be appointed commissioner. He told the current investigators that he had already investigated Raisbeck and it was a dead end. So the case went cold again. In 1988, the police finally talked to Norman Raisbeck. At the time, he was 61 years old and he was dying in a hospital in Adelaide. He admitted that both he and Thomas Craig raped Anne Sapelli. Raisbeck said the last time he saw Sapelli, Craig had her in a headlock. A month after his confession, Raisbeck died. The police thought that Raisbeck's deathbed confession was enough evidence to arrest Thomas Craig for Anne Sapelli's murder. But once again, the police had made a mistake. When they were listening to Raisbeck's deathbed confession, they only took notes. It was not a sworn statement. So the deathbed confession had no legal standing and therefore couldn't be used as evidence against Craig. Since Raisbeck was dead, nothing else could be done. So the case became cold once more. In 1996, there was an internal police investigation. The initial lead detective refused to be interviewed. In 2001, a coronial inquest concluded that Craig and Raisbeck should not have been excluded as suspects. In 2012, a reporter tracked down Thomas Craig. He was working for a church, collecting donations from bins. He denied being violent towards women, and he said he didn't kill Anne Sapelli. Unfortunately, after 52 years, the murder of Anne Sapelli may never be closed because most of the evidence has been lost. However, most people believe that Thomas Craig killed her. Craig's current whereabouts are unknown. Number 1. Thomas Decora. In the summer of 1971, 21-year-old Thomas Decora was living in a mobile home in Columbus, Georgia, with his 18-year-old wife Cheryl and their 18-month-old son, Bradley. Thomas was a soldier and he was stationed at nearby Fort Benning. On July 13, 1971, Cheryl was working overtime and Thomas was at home with Bradley. When Cheryl arrived home after work, their neighbor told her that Thomas had taken Bradley to Martin Army Hospital on Fort Benning. Cheryl went to the hospital and Thomas told her that Bradley had been in an accident. Thomas said that Bradley had fallen and he hit his head on a step that was 2 inches high. Sadly, 18-month-old Bradley never woke up and he died 2 days after he was admitted to the hospital. After his death, Cheryl asked Thomas if he had done something to Bradley. Thomas said that he didn't and he could never hurt their son. He told Cheryl that she was just imagining things. But Cheryl had good reason to be suspicious of Thomas. Bradley was born when Thomas was in Vietnam. When Thomas returned home, Bradley thought of him as a stranger, and he cried a lot when he was around. Thomas was also abusive to both Cheryl and Bradley. Bradley had been taken to the hospital several times because of injuries he sustained at the hands of his father. But Cheryl believed Thomas when he said he didn't hurt Bradley. After Bradley's death, they moved to Wisconsin and they had 2 more children. Thomas continued to be abusive. In 1987, she finally divorced him. Although Cheryl had tried to move on, she had never been able to shake the feeling that Thomas caused Bradley's death. When her son, who was born after Bradley's death, started asking how the baby died, she became more determined to figure out the truth. But she had no idea how to do that. She talked to a lawyer, and the lawyer told her to forget about it and focus on her living children. In 2009, Cheryl called the Columbus Police Department and told them about her suspicions. It had been 38 years since Bradley died. The police took her allegations seriously and they investigated for nearly 2 years. In late 2010, they tracked down Thomas Decora. He was 60 years old and he was in a VA hospital in Minnesota, dying of cancer. The detectives went to the hospital and interviewed Thomas. He was in bad shape and could mostly answer by nodding and shaking his head. He admitted that the baby wouldn't stop crying, so he punched him in the head and Bradley lost consciousness. Thomas died shortly afterward on November 5, 2010. The police said had he not died, he would have been charged with murder. The investigators credit Cheryl with coming forward regarding her suspicions. Had she kept quiet, they probably would have never known that Bradley was murdered. Cheryl said that the deathbed confession gave her some closure and served a little bit of justice for her son. Thank you so much for watching today's video. And now here's a clip from our new video, 3 haunted houses made famous by horror movies, on our new channel, Paranormally Listed. The mass murder was just the start of the Amityville house lore. In 1975, George and Kathleen Lutz moved their 3 children into the Amityville home. They were there for just 28 days before they left in the middle of the night. George said he would wake up at 3:15 every morning, which is thought to be around the time that the DeFeo family was murdered. He said he saw his wife levitate off their bed. The family and visitors experienced cold spots in their home. Doors weighing as much as 250 pounds would somehow be torn off their hinges and tossed aside. A knife was knocked around in the kitchen. People said that they saw an image of a demon in the fireplace. Some people saw something with a pig face and glowing red eyes looking in through the windows. You can find a link to Paranormally Listed on the top left hand of the screen. You can also find a link in the description below this video. But that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.